Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. This is the final episode of our series, The Art of Us. We've talked all about relationships, and if you haven't had time to listen, I want to encourage you to go back and go ahead and subscribe. And lots of different platforms that we're on today. I do have my co-host who's been with me all the way through this series.
Yes, I made it all the way.
Incredible job, Stephanie.
It's been awesome.
Yeah, now in the very first episode, we talked about how we met, and then you go back and check that out.
all the fun stuff.
Now, like in every other episode, because we've been talking about just having a conversation about relationships, we've talked with Carson and Jess.
Yeah.
We've talked with our daughter, Bailey. And today, no exception, our oldest son, Tyler, and his beloved wife, Amber, are with us. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
We're excited to be here.
All right. So we got to start in the same place that we've started with everybody is how long you've been married and how did you meet?
We celebrated 8 years of marriage in January.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we met at church.
Yes, we did.
A good
We
place
met at
to meet.
church. It's a great place to meet.
Yes.
We never thought we would be together, though. And now we're sitting here 8 years later.
Nope, we're the story.
Yeah.
We were best friends.
Oh, yes. I remember
we remember.
that.
We remember. Y'all weren't dating. You weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. Even though we knew.
Yes.
We knew before you guys.
And they
I
were
feel like
always
everybody
together.
did. Yeah, always
Nope.
together.
Best friends, always together, and then we fell in love.
But that's a good way to start.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. How long would you say you were best friends before you
We knew?
decided to date?
Yes. I mean, I would say we were really close friends all throughout high school.
Yeah.
Probably from the time that I was a freshman. You know, I remember us always through high school being close. And
Yeah.
then we went to college together, I mean, locally. But we had,
Yeah.
kind of the same schedules. We rode together,
Yeah.
and that was where
That's
our
when it
love
all
journey.
sparked.
Yeah.
You know?
It's where our love journey began.
Yeah.
No, so how long did you date before you got married?
2.5 years. Yeah, before we got married.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit longer engagement than
Yeah.
we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a good thing.
That's right. And now 8 years, 2 grandkids.
Yes.
Oh, wait, 2 kids for you, 2 grandkids for us.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening, if you want to stop by sometime, I'd be glad to show you pictures of
Oh, yes. We have lots of pictures.
The
best
Those
kids.
grandbabies. They are.
lots and lots of pictures.
Yeah.
Now, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how love grows and how it changes over the decades and over the years, and how to keep it from falling apart and how to actually grow it and build it and strengthen it. And I kind of like to start sometimes either with something that's in the scripture, or even like, for example, I found an article in the Business Insider. Now, I don't know what Business Insider knows about love, but they had an article about it. And I just kind of wanted to walk through these and see what you guys think about it. The first thing, for example, it said that marriage gets easier the more effort you put into it. Your partner will almost always respond in kind. So let's start by asking those married less than a decade, almost coming up on 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what do you think about that statement? You think it's true the vast majority of the time?
I mean, I think there's definitely something to be said for effort. I mean, marriage does take work. It takes effort. I don't know that it necessarily gets easier with
Because you have to
effort.
put the effort in.
Yeah,
Right.
and I think a lot of times the effort that you're putting in, it's communication, it's working through conflict, it's
Right.
working through different situations that are uncomfortable or difficult to talk about. So I don't know that I would say it gets easier with effort. I think it becomes more rewarding with effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would say the same thing, because you still have to put in the hard work. So
Right.
I think your partner appreciates the hard work and the effort. But I don't know if I would say that it all
gets
just becomes easier.
And it brings more intimacy. And I think that's where the blessing and where the reward is the intimacy. But intimacy doesn't come easily.
Right.
I think the only easier part that I might say would be with the longevity, as we think about being in a relationship for a long period of time, is the better you know the person,
Yeah.
the easier it is to serve that person.
Yeah.
That's true.
You know what I mean? So in the beginning, you're having to spend a lot of effort on figuring out who they are.
Right.
You know, what builds them up, what tears them down, what is romantic, what is
Yeah.
not romantic.
Yeah, that's good.
And then the longer you're together.
Yeah, that's true. I would, I definitely agree to that because I think about today. We've been married 33 years, so early on in the marriage, I had to learn all those things, and that is a lot of work. Now
I'm a complicated person.
You are a very complicated person, but I feel like I know all of that complication. I know how to uncomplicate you.
Well, he said also, the writer of the article said, then they almost respond in kind. So, Amber, let me ask you that. Do you notice that if you put forth effort to serve Tyler, does he then respond with that same effort, or have you seen something different?
I don't know if I would.
There's only one right answer.
Yeah. Well, we're on the Troy Gramling podcast. We got to be honest here. No, I do think that there is an effort, but I think sometimes what I've come to conclusion is sometimes as women you have to sometimes instruct men. Men don't read minds maybe as much as women do.
Right.
So I feel like we have to communicate more of what our necessities and our needs are, where we may be serving and thinking that it's going to be returned as easily or in kind, but it doesn't, only because maybe it's not as aware within the direct communication maybe that I need to give for what I need. So I may be serving in some type of way, and he may be returning it in kind, but it may not be how I need or want it in that season. So then I have to communicate to get what I would want, I guess.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, the hard part, you talk about putting forth the effort into the relationship, is when you don't get in kind. So when you serve and they don't notice it or they don't respond in kind.
Yeah.
Right.
Or when they respond to you, right, unkind. And you then got to not respond in kind, you know?
Yeah.
Got to respond in kind.
Yeah.
Those are those effort times that we're talking about.
Yes, for sure.
Now, in the article, he goes on to say that the way you relate to your spouse or the person you've been dating for a long time will change many times over the years, especially in marriage. So y'all been married for 8 years. That's long enough to be able to tell. How is your marriage, do you think, different today than it was that very first year?
I've got a great answer for this.
Oh, gosh. Here we go.
I think when we first got married, you're always trying to bring aspects of how you were raised or how you grew up or how you operate into that marriage.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of time to really build your own family. The Bible talks about, two become one flesh. And that takes time. That doesn't happen naturally or just, because there was a wedding ceremony. It takes intentionality and time. And I think when we first got married, and I've shared this on the platform before, so I'll share it on the podcast, but Amber has many amazing attributes, but she can hold a grudge like nobody's business. So
Yes.
I don't agree with that.
Never, not Amber.
And I remember when we first got married, I think conflict took a lot longer to work through. Because, there might be a day where, she shuts down and doesn't want to talk to me at all, and the next day.
You probably did something.
Probably did. But that's one of the biggest differences I see in our marriage today is that we have learned how to work through conflict quickly and how to not just let things linger, not just linger in our emotions or our feelings or our frustrations. And I think we also learned enough about each other that we don't get frustrated as quickly.
Right.
Things can happen where we might
Just let it brush off the shoulder a little bit more.
Yeah, we might have an argument or have a disagreement, but it doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a conflict. And I think that there is a difference between an argument and a conflict. We're going to have arguments, but I feel like one of the things I've learned is to hold things just more loosely and not every
thing has to be a fight.
Yeah, and not every fault has to be highlighted. Like not every fault has to be talked about. Yeah. There are some things where we want to give grace for the same grace I would want to receive. I want to offer to my wife. Right. I've got a lot of faults and I don't appreciate when every single one of them are highlighted. So why would I do that to her? So I feel like that's some ways I've seen our marriage change over the
And I
years?
think in simple terms, even just like our TV shows, like when we first got married, like we weren't watching a TV show without one another. Like we would come home, we
Had
would
to do
cook
everything
dinner,
together.
like we were doing everything together, like everything. Now it's like he's like, oh yeah, I've been watching this show, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been watching this show, and it's like, what have we become? Like we used to watch
Our lives are
everything together.
separate.
Well, let me tell you something. It doesn't get better. I can tell you, 33 years later, we used to be the same way, and like we had these certain shows that like, and I wouldn't watch it without him.
Right,
Like if
right.
we recorded it, I'm like, no, I got to wait on Troy to watch this show. And now I can't really think of one show that we have in common that we like. Like you go in one direction, and as far as what you like in shows, and I go in a different direction. So
Yep.
that's
And-
what you had to look forward to,
Woohoo!
Amber.
What
So
direction,
excited.
real quick, what direction is that?
I have
Let's
good taste.
let's share with the
I have
listeners.
good taste, and
He
the other.
by good taste, this is what he means. He doesn't like any show where there's any suspense or really any drama, so in my eyes, it's like boring stuff. Like nothing happens.
No, I got enough stress and drama in my
Right.
life going on to watch it.
And all the listeners said amen.
Everybody's got stress. I like those fun. I like the cartoons.
Yes,
It's either Andy Griffith or Lifetime.
two
in y'all's
extremes.
house.
Yes.
So, so Steph, how about us? We've been married now, going on our 4th decade.
Yeah.
How has, from your perspective, our marriage changed over the years?
Well, I think it's even something that we mentioned a little earlier that, the in the early years of marriage, you're just trying to figure out each other, and learn, learn all the intimate things about each other. So I think, as time goes on and, years later, then, I feel like now, like I know you. So for example, like, I know timing, like if I'm going to bring up something to you that I know maybe is going to like maybe bring a sense of stress or be frustrating, I know when the perfect time is most of the time. Maybe I don't always get that right. But I think, the more you learn about each other and, then the easier those things become.
Yeah, a lot of times people, especially been married for 50, 60 years, and one of the spouse dies, and then the other one dies not too long after that. I think, one thing I've noticed is that the longer we've been married, the more dependent. We may not watch the same shows, but I'm a lot more dependent upon you than I was, let's say even the first 10 years.
Right.
Because we have done life together now.
For so long.
Yeah.
And I think I'm the same way. I've become more dependent upon you. So I think that's part of the natural progression.
Yeah, I think, and then the danger side is that, you put in all the effort to have a long-term relationship, but then you can have so much confidence in that relationship that you don't do the things that, keep it exciting and all those things. And sometimes you're just always surprised when someone breaks up after, 4 decades of marriage or something.
Yeah.
All right, the other thing that they said is marriage connects you, and this I thought was a great point, not only to your partner, but to their life, their family, their work, and beyond. Be ready for all of that to become part of your life, too. So, Tyler, what about Amber's work, family, all of the things I just read a moment ago has surprised you the most as it's now become a part of your life?
That's a great question.
Be careful, people are listening.
I think that's the beautiful part of marriage is that you share your lives with one another, and it's a beautiful thing to watch, to experience, and get to be a part of. And I think for me, Amber and I talk about often, in terms of family, we both come from great families where we have, on both sides, we have parents that are still married, have been married for a lot of years, a lot of wisdom, experience, and I think we've been able to lean a lot into that and been able to have a much healthier marriage because of the support system that we have around us and those that we've been able to learn from. I'm trying to think if there's anything like surprising. I mean, when I first started spending more time with Amber's family when we were dating, because it's kind of like when you're friends, there's some walls that are still up, but then when you're dating, a little walls come down, and then when you get married,
They
a
all
lot
come
of
down.
walls come down. And think I was surprised by, Amber comes from a very honest, and by honest, I don't mean like, yes, they're filled with integrity, but just, they just have really raw, like, conversations that just surprised me, I mean, nothing was off limits, nothing was taboo. Like, I don't know, it just wasn't like conversations that I feel like I would have to work myself up to have in like a table setting, like around the table, like came so naturally to them. And at first I'm like, man, this family's kind of crazy. Like, this is wild. But that's also been a really beautiful thing to watch and get to be a part of. And now that being my family as well, getting to participate in that has been a blessing. So I guess I would say that was maybe a little surprise.
Yeah. You've opened up along the years.
There you go.
How about you, Amber?
I think the most surprising thing about, I guess, joining into the family was how much I would enjoy it. Like you come from your own family and then you go into like sharing this family with somebody else and you're like, okay, like I have a mom and a dad and another one, and then I have brothers and sisters and, just how much I would enjoy having another family, having more family. Like, I think because you're so protective of your family, you love your family. I hope you love your family. But I protect my family. So it's like to open the door for another family to come in was kind of like, oh, wow, this is going to be different. Yeah. And I think the cool part to watch was along the years, for me, it's just gotten better. Like starting off, it's kind of like, it's like what Tyler said, but you get married and like for the in-law portion, it's kind of like these walls are up and you're like, okay, like I'm coming from my family, I'm bringing this in, but like what's okay here? What's not okay? Like you're trying to feel it out. And then as you go along the years, you're like, oh, okay, like this is good. And I think for me, that's a blessing because I don't know if many people, you hear the statements, oh, your in-laws, that's your in-laws, but for me, I've really enjoyed y'all.
Aw, thank you.
And enjoyed, Carson and Bailey and inheriting sisters. Like I've never had sisters, I have another sister-in-law, but I'm like, wow, I never thought I would like sisters. And now we're here, so.
No, and that's good because I think a lot of times, in-laws and sister-in-laws can get a bad rap. It's where
100%.
people are, like you said, kind of the statement. And, it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And it is a beautiful thing when it can be such a healthy relationship. So, that's really good.
Yeah.
And it's a good learning. You think about it because once you see how extended families operate, then you can kind of understand where your spouse is coming from.
Right.
And that everybody doesn't deal with problems the same way or express love in the same way.
Gives you more grace and perspective for your spouse too. 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
They go on and they give these 3 points that are supposed to help you in your relationship. So let's see what you guys think. It says talking isn't necessarily communicating. So I guess my question really to any of you guys is that true? And if it is, what's the difference between talking and communicating?
That's good. That's a deep question.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's profound. Talking isn't always communicating.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so much that goes into play with communication. I think, like you mentioned, timing is important, and I think that, a lot of times we can get caught up in surface level conversations that don't actually create intimacy in the relationship. So you can spend a lot of time talking, but if what you're talking about or the content of what you're talking about isn't creating intimacy, and I'm not saying every conversation has to create intimacy, but there are definitely those times where, you want to have conversations that create a sense of depth and intimacy into your marriage. I also think a big difference is in terms of listening. Yeah. Talking, 2 people can talk and not hear one another, but communication, more than talking, actually requires listening. Yeah. And I think that's something that is easy for all couples, married, dating, whatever the situation is easy to discount. It's easy to stop listening in conversation. So I think that's a big difference.
And I think action too. Communicating is not just talking because there's so much action put behind what we're talking about. There's also our body language. I mean, we can communicate something without actually saying a word.
Right.
And I think that that's important on how we're living our life outside of just the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I know as a pastor, I think of it between speaker and communicator, in the sense
good.
that, and what's the focus on? Is the focus on me getting information out or connecting?
Right.
And you think about in a relationship, it's sometimes you're just saying something, and but sometimes you need to do that. The dogs need to be let out, right?
Yeah.
But then there are other times where you're really trying to connect, and making the time for that is important.
Yeah.
They say, and we talked about this a bit, but I like the way they say it right here at the end. It says you marry more than your husband or your wife, right? You marry, and it didn't say talk so much about in-laws, but it says you marry their life. And I think maybe sometimes we neglect this conversation while we're dating.
Yeah.
We make assumptions,
Right.
Of what is their life and what are their dreams.
Yeah.
And Steph, as you think back about our life and how maybe what we thought it was going to be, it's kind of different. And
Right.
you mentioned on the very first episode, but I think it's worth saying again that for us to enter into this relationship, you had to think about that specifically, especially as what you were going to school for at the time and those kind of things. So quickly share that with us again.
Yeah, I think, for sure, those conversations need to be had, before you get married, when in the dating relationship, and especially once you know that it's leading towards that, you don't just marry them, but it's their life. It's like the Bible says, the two become one. So it's no longer my dreams, my goals. It's our life, it's our dreams and our goals. So I think, making sure that that's the direction you want to go. That's what God's calling you to do. I think that's very, very important, instead of getting into it and being like, well, whoa, wait a minute. I have my own dreams, my own goals, because that's now the two have become one. So I think that's very important.
That's some real important conversations. And I think, one of the dangers of just being involved sexually is it can override those conversations.
Yeah.
Rather than having the difficult conversation, you just kind of jump in bed.
Yeah.
All right, Amber, when you think about life, what was it about Tyler's life that attracted you? And Tyler, I'm going to ask you the same question. So if one of you has an answer before the other, that's fine. But what about the other's life, the way they were living that attracted you?
I just loved how he served. I think that was one of the things, even still to this day, that I'm very attracted by. But it attracted me because the way he served his friends, the way he served his family, his church, that was always an attraction to me. And we had been friends for a while, so I knew his heart, and it always came back to the heart. And so I just loved just how he served the house. And going back to the last question, I remember actually evaluating some of that in our relationship, because I didn't want to do ministry. I did not want to be married to a pastor. I did not want to work at a church. That was not my thing. I was like, nope. I knew I wanted to help people. I wanted to get a psychology degree, be a psychiatrist. I knew I wanted to understand why people thought the way that they did. But I had to really evaluate, am I going to enter into this life? Because he knew confidently from the time he was 16, I'm going to be a pastor. This is what I'm going to do. And, but over time, I think God changed that attraction and allowed me to just connect more with the heart and, submit and follow that. But I do think that just his servant's heart and just the way that he served others was a huge attraction in his life. So
Awesome. Now that I know that you think that's sexy, I will
I
serve
still
all the
do.
time.
When you wake up with the kids and, you
I've
let
got
me
some
sleep.
things you can do if you want to be attractive.
I think for me, one of the things that I've always been attracted with how Amber has lived is her confidence. I remember even just when we were in high school, she always carried herself with confidence, and it didn't matter what her group of friends was doing. Like, she just had the confidence to kind of march to the beat of her own drum, not to, she gave the appearance she wasn't trying to fit in, and that confidence, I think, allowed her to have a really good head on her shoulders. She wasn't just acting a fool. And, the other thing, I think she's always been a very loyal friend, and loyalty is a rare quality to see in people these days. So I would say that her confidence and loyalty and how she lived her life, I was very attracted to.
Yeah.
And
Well, I got one more for you.
okay.
Because
I said two.
because
You gotta
said
say
two.
two.
So I have one more quick. But I always prayed because I was always strong-willed. I still am, but I prayed for somebody stronger than me. That was my biggest prayer is, Lord, bring somebody.
Remember, you prayed for that.
I know. I remind myself of that every day. And, it's funny because when we were friends, I never thought that he would have. And then over
Be
time,
that.
God's like, oh, no, he is. Let me
Yeah.
show you. I'm like, okay.
Now you have two kids
Like,
that you
yes.
see that.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, thank you, God. Why did I pray for this?
Yes, lots of strong
Oh,
opinions in
that's
that
good.
that
Yes.
family
Yeah.
for sure. So we're gonna do. We got just a few moments left, but we're gonna do. We might call a speed round from some of the questions that we've gotten from some of our listeners. So anybody can jump in that would like. Here's the first one. What is the first step you would take when navigating through tough times in your relationship? What's the first thing you'd do?
I say go to God in prayer. Like, if there's one thing worth fighting for, it is your marriage. It is worth humbling yourself, letting your ego go, and just getting on your knees before God. I would say the first thing is going to God in prayer, asking for wisdom and the ability to forgive. Because tough seasons are going to demand forgiveness, and we can't do that in our own strength. It's only through the power of the Holy Spirit. So
That's good.
That's good.
That's good.
Pray together, I think, is
Yeah.
if you can, if the other one's
Yeah.
willing, and
Yep.
pray honestly
Yeah.
in front of each other.
Yeah.
And then I would just say that I agree. And then I would get a third person involved, not necessarily a friend,
Right.
but a
Right.
pastor, a counselor, somebody that can honestly give you a perspective to help
Yeah.
you grow. All right. What is one method that you would like to start implementing to improve your relationship during, we'll just say to improve your relationship. What's something you're thinking that you would like to add? We'll start with you, Steph.
Oh gosh, you give me a hard one.
It is a hard one.
One thing that I would like to start implementing to improve our relationship.
It's just so good that
I know it's so good. It's hard to think of what we need to do different.
maybe watch television together.
Oh yeah, that
Find a show you both like.
That's awesome.
That's
Yeah, that is a great thing. So we can watch TV together.
That's it.
I think one that we've just recently done because of the new year is just doing a devotional together.
Yeah.
Like we've done devotional separate, but we, now have sat in the car every morning after we drop Lion and we sit there and we take 30 minutes and do a devotional together.
Yeah.
And I think that we've already started it, but it's really nice
Yeah.
to do that. So.
yeah, I agree.
Devotions, prayers, because you can't hide in a prayer. It's
Right.
good to be honest.
Yeah.
All right, we got time for one more. That one's too. I'll just ask an easy one because this one's too difficult. We'll come back. If we didn't get to your question, we will come back to it. How often do you go out on a date?
I think it's usually about once a month. With kids, it used to be like every week,
All
let's
the
go,
time.
all the time. And then we had kids, and then now we have 2 kids, and it just
Yeah.
becomes more challenging. But once a month is the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be like a extravagant save up, go to a
Yeah.
nice expensive restaurant. Sometimes it's saying, you know what, we're going to put the kids to bed early and we're going to go out and get ice cream,
Right.
or
Yeah.
sometimes it's we're going to do dinner, just the two of us, and we're going to watch Netflix,
Right.
or
Yeah.
watch a show or a documentary that we enjoy. And,
You're going to watch TV together.
Yeah, yeah. It's the
Yeah.
set aside intentional time.
Yes.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think intentional is the big word.
Right.
Just being intentional. Because I know the longer you're married,
Right.
the more you have to be intentional.
Yeah.
It's like we were talking about early. So
It's good.
Yeah, and Steph and I get the opportunity to work together, so we are together a lot.
Right.
So, and then the kids are all older,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
we have a lot of time together. So it's a little more difficult to differentiate. And again, we trust one another. So making that commitment can become, I think, it's challenging with kids and everything, but it can even become challenging
Yeah.
when you have none of those.
Yeah.
Those things. We used to have a
Yeah.
pastor on staff, Pastor Allen, that was incredibly good at asking. He would ask me when I was, yeah, you guys were getting close to the age that we were back then. But, when's the last time you went out on a date?
Yeah.
And he would ask that. That's a good question if you're out there listening to
Yeah.
ask the people around you that you love and care about, because
Yeah.
we can all
Yeah,
drift.
no matter how long you've been married. I
Yeah,
would say.
yeah, we can all drift away from one another.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you once again for tuning in to the Troy Gramling podcast. There are 4 episodes in this series, and we're just getting started. We're going to talk to a bunch of interesting people in the coming weeks. And so be sure and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.